Andrew McCart, iFLTV, Mr. Dan Rafael. It's been a while, mate. How are you? Your
I'm
beard's
good.
got a little
Hasn't been
bit
that long.
bigger.
Man. Hasn't been that long.
It's been a month and a bit. I think it's been over a month, is it?
Probably haven't shaved since then.
Yeah, me neither, but I have. That's a lie. Yeah, how's things, Mr. Rafael? Hope you're well.
Yeah, everything is good. Thanks for having me on as always.
I'm glad, always happy to have you on, like I say, because you do not mince your words. You speak from your heart, and that's what a lot want to talk to you about this because there's big news coming out now, an American fight, an American-based fight, which I'm sure you're happy about in Canelo versus Crawford, um, September 13th. Now, probably the biggest announcement from that, we all kind of half knew it was going to head towards Vegas. There was talk about LA and I think and all that, and what date it would be. But I think the bigger news is Netflix.
Yeah.
As an American, as having a mega fight like that and it being on Netflix, just break it down for me. What's your initial reaction to all that?
Well, it's great for boxing fans. I mean, obviously, it's a fact that you have a mega fight that doesn't cost 80 or $90 on pay per view.
Mm.
That's to cut to the chase. But in terms of the date, the 13th, Turkey had already announced after he said the 12th, they had switched it to the 13th. He did mention various locations. I never really thought that was legit. I always thought no matter at the end, wherever they were maybe looking, it was always going to wind up in Las Vegas. I know that's where the boxers wanted to fight. That's where it made the most sense for many different reasons. And that's the kind of fight that is going to be in Las Vegas. And then there's still, as you noted, it will be Las Vegas on the 13th. When they made that announcement on Tuesday, including the Netflix part of it, and that Dana White would be the promoter, they did not specify the specific venue in Las Vegas. My people tell me that are involved with this thing that they're trying to, they know where it's going to be, but I guess it just wasn't done yet, and they wanted to
Mm.
get it out there. But while anything can change at the last minute, my understanding is that they're working towards trying to finish a deal with UNLV to switch their college football game, which is scheduled for Saturday the 13th in the Allegiant Stadium, which is their home stadium for their games, and to either switch it out to a different location or to perhaps go on a different day that would allow them to then have the boxing event in the stadium. Now, I guess that could change, and if not, maybe they do it at the T-Mobile Arena. When they do their press tour that's coming up, they're doing 3 stops. They're going to be in Riyadh. Then a couple of days later, they'll be in New York City. And then a couple of days after that, they're going to be in Las Vegas. And the venue they're doing this press conference, which presumably will be open to fans also, I guess. They haven't said that, but why would you then do it in such a huge location? They're doing that in the T-Mobile Arena. So we'll see what happens with the actual venue. But suffice to say, it's going to be in Vegas. And as far as what you asked about the Netflix, they at Netflix, they're in the big event business.
Mm.
They saw what a boxing event at the highest level can do when they put on Jake Paul against Mike Tyson at the end of last year. Andrew, that did crazy numbers. I mean, huge numbers. Even like the women's boxing match on the undercard, the second fight between Katie Taylor and Serrano, when they looked at those metrics just for that boxing event, for that fight as an undercard, it did huge numbers, which was one of the reasons that they decided to go ahead and commit to doing Katie Taylor and Serrano number 3, which will take place in a few weeks. And that's going to be on Netflix also. So this will actually be their third boxing
Hmm.
live event. And look, all due respect to Jake Paul and Tyson, they were huge names, but that was not a serious championship boxing match. That was, great entertainment, great fun, however you want to look at it. And obviously Katie and Serrano put on a tremendous battle in the co-feature. This is different. This is a bona fide mega boxing event, regardless of the bells and the whistles. This is true championship boxing. This is the undisputed super middleweight champ, Canelo Alvarez, future Hall of Famer, matching up with a fellow 4 division champion and
Mm.
a 2-weight undisputed champion who is coming up in weight, but also a future Hall of Famer to, put together 2 of the best fighters in the business in a true mega event. For my money, it's the biggest fight so far, or even not so far, because I don't see anything else coming after it this year. It's the biggest fight this year. I would say that even if somehow they manage to get Fury against Joshua done, still think this is a bigger deal, at least certainly in this part of the world. And, Netflix is going to probably pay a humongous amount of money for this event, and they're going to get a big one.
It's going to be a big one. And talking about a big one, surely it needs a big stadium, right? Surely the Allegiant Stadium in Vegas, surely that should be the venue for a fight of this magnitude.
Well, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. You can
Mm.
have the fight in T-Mobile Arena and fill that place up, and they'll still have a huge gate for the fight. Remember Mayweather Pacquiao? took place in the MGM Grand, which was before the T-Mobile even was open. And, it did the biggest gate in the history of the world. Now, obviously, Canelo against Crawford won't be at that level. I'm just making the point, though, that you can still have it in that type of arena and generate, for me, I don't care how much money they generate. It's not going in my pocket. But, T-Mobile Arena for that caliber an event is just fine. If they choose to go to the stadium, so be it. I mean, I personally don't love stadium fights. I don't think it, unless you're sitting right at ringside, you don't really get the great view no matter where you're at. I mean, and then you have to rely on looking at screens and that sort of thing. But either way, look, these are first class venues. If T-Mobile is good enough to host the biggest fights it's hosted in the past, it can host this fight. If Allegiant Stadium is good enough for the NFL, if it's good enough to host WrestleMania a few weeks ago, and apparently they're going to host it for the second year in a row next year. They're doing WrestleMania again. Those are all big events. So, either way, it's going to be a party in Las Vegas come mid-September.
100%. Fingers crossed. I'm going to be there. I'm going to try and somehow, some way get over there because that is a fight that I cannot wait. Now, talking about Dana White promoting a fight of this magnitude, I mean, his first sort of promotion, and he's got a mega fight like this. I mean, I follow the UFC. I love the way Dana White is a businessman, the way he operates the UFC. But me and you both know that the UFC model and a boxing model is two different things. Now, how do you think that Dana White is going to do with this sort of promotion and the fight itself?
Well, I think Dana will do a great job on the promotion. I mean, he knows how to promote fights. I mean, whether you're in an octagon or a ring or using the small gloves or the boxing gloves or whatever, he's dealt with combat athletes for decades at this point and has helped build UFC into what it has become. And no disrespect to anybody that's involved with the promotion. It ain't that hard to promote and talk about the greatness of the two guys you're going to be promoting for this fight. But Dana has a way about him. He obviously has a magnetic personality. He can find himself in places that others might not be able to in mainstream media, and that's important to get the word out. He says what he thinks, and this doesn't come as a surprise. I mean, he was announced as the promoter right away, and then it seemed to go sideways, but he's back in. And even when they announced their deal with TKO back, maybe a month or two ago, and he did a whole round of interviews. I had him as a guest on my podcast, and they had announced in their press release that TKO's boxing promotion or boxing league, however you want to term it, was not going to start doing their events until 2026. And Dana and I spoke about that. He made the point, look, we will cater our schedule to the needs of our broadcast partner. Obviously, they don't have a broadcast partner, so they're out there looking to, see who wants to do a deal with them. And when that deal is done, they'll have an idea from that outlet what they need. But I asked him, I said, well, if you're with Turkey and TKO is involved, you may not be doing regular fights in 2025, but it wouldn't it make sense for you to be promoting, to kick things off with your new endeavor, to be promoting the biggest boxing match that there is at the moment? He kind of laughed, but we all kind of knew this was coming, not in any way a surprise. The one thing that was a surprise was when Turkey did a little bit of an about face and announced Sella as the promoter, which, Sella, frankly, and Riyadh season, neither one of them have a license, in the United States. Not to say they couldn't get one, I guess, but they're unlicensed, so they would have to go through, quite a bit to get that license. But TKO and their group, Dana obviously knows what he's doing. I think it's going to be, for me anyway, I look at it like it'll be like a fresh thing. It'll be something new. I mean, again, it's nothing against the other promoters, but I have covered 1,000 top ranked fights and Golden Boy fights and Matchroom fights and PBC fights, you name it. And Dana doing it, I'm interested to see how they operate, to see if there's differences from what it's like covering big fights from these other outfits. One thing is the same though. When the bell rings, the guys are fighting, whoever the promoter is.
Definitely, and I agree with you. I'm intrigued to see what Dana does with this promotion. I mean, like you say, you've got two superstars in the ring. It might not be hard to promote and sell it because the fans know who these two guys are. And that being said, then, Dan, the fight itself, I mean, going off, Crawford, would have over a year out the ring. I think it was August last year when he fought Madrimov. Canelo against Skull was lackluster, I think it's safe to say.
To be nice about it.
Well, I'm being nice, yeah. I'm nice. I mean, you could probably come up with a better word than that if you want.
I'm a much bigger prick than you are.
Thank you. I don't think, I'm just nicey on the computer, Dan. I let you work your magic. I'm a prick away from the computer. So the fight itself, going off of like the variables of maybe Crawford's 38, hasn't fought in a year. Canelo's younger, but he's had that lackluster, for lack of a better word, in Skull. Looking at this fight, Dan, who's the favourite?
Well, I've seen odds actually as soon as the fight was made official, and Canelo is the favorite, and that's understandable. He is the younger fighter for what that's worth. He is the fighter that's been more active. He has consistently had his 2 fights per year. Say whatever you want about the Skull fight, which was absolutely horrible, but he did get in the ring and have 12 rounds of activity, even though it wasn't a lot of activity within the fight. But Crawford is a tremendous fighter. Also, he is a little older, but the thing I looked at when you want to talk stat wise, I mean, Canelo has a lot more matches, number one, but he didn't have really an amateur career. Crawford has far fewer bouts, but Crawford had a ton of fights as an amateur. But as a professional, Crawford has literally like half the number of rounds that Canelo has. And those rounds, that's what takes their toll, not to mention the untold amounts of rounds that they've both sparred. But I'm guaranteeing you that Canelo has sparred more rounds just because he's had way more fights. So, look, Canelo should rightfully be the favorite, but I can't help but have pangs of De La Hoya versus Pacquiao, even though it's slightly different because Pacquiao was the much younger ascendant fighter, and Crawford, like Canelo, is also admittedly sort of closing in on the end of his career. He hasn't taken a lot of punishment, Crawford, but he is, like you said, he's 38. Obviously, he's made a huge amount of money, going to make a boatload of money on this fight, and hasn't fought for a while. And if you really get down to it, whatever you thought about how terrible Canelo looked in the Skull fight, look, Crawford moving up from the Spence fight, which was, a while. He had a long layoff between this. The Spence fight was what, July of 23? Fights August of 24 against Majmov. Had a long layoff in between those 2 fights. Moved up in weight. He didn't look that good against Majmov. Let's not forget that. Let's not sugarcoat that. He won. But it was awfully close and competitive. There were actually, I was at the fight. There was a few people in the media group that thought that Majmov had done enough to win the fight. And so both of them come in off of very, very questionable kind of performances. But sometimes you have to have the caliber opponent to motivate you. I guarantee you that Terence Crawford will be far more motivated against a legend like Canelo Alvarez than he was against Majmov, that was not well known, that only had like about 11 fights as a professional. And Canelo Alvarez, I guarantee you, is going to be more motivated to be back in Las Vegas among his people on Mexican Independence Day weekend, fighting a fellow future Hall of Famer and 4-division champion, than he was fighting at 6 o'clock in the morning in Saudi Arabia against a guy that nobody ever heard of in front of a very small crowd. So, who knows? That's the bottom line.
Definitely, and like I said, that's what makes it intriguing, because there's loads of variables to this fight, and that's why we're going to tune in, because not just we have 2 superstars, we do have these sort of little bits in between the fight that we're looking into.
It's not going to cost you $80 or $90 American, because it's going to be on Netflix, which is in like 300 million homes around the world, including, I don't know, around 100 million subscribers here in the United States. So it will be widely accessible to everybody. It will be in the mainstream, and obviously with Dana out there doing his thing, it'll get even more attention. It's a big one. It's a big one.
Like I still can't go over that. You pay $80 for a pay-per-view, man. You know how much we get pissed off here in the UK if it's £25.
I know.
Like if it's £25,
you guys are spoiled. That's why.
Yeah, we are spoiled. We'll do a hard segue left now, and we're going to talk about maybe a lackluster fight. And it's it might not be a lackluster fight, but the performances in the last fights showed that. Was the Teofimo Lopez, Devin Haney not happening now? Now, I said to you before I pushed record, did you see Teofimo's Instagram live that he did? And he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing here, that he agreed to a monetary amount for his second fight with Riyadh Season and the likes. Now, Devin Haney was going to be that second fight. He already fought Barboza, was the first. Now, he said that he was going to take a pay cut from the money that was agreed, and that is why the Devin Haney fight isn't happening. I just want to get your response to that.
Well, I think my good friend Teofimo Lopez is going to have to get his story straight, because on the one hand, he's talking, I believe what you say. I didn't see that particular video, but if it was a financial related thing, okay, fine. But then he had in other media, there was comments from his management talking about how there was some type of personal issue that he didn't want to get into that was the reason for it. I can only speak to what I know about what was going on, and I talked to people on both sides who were directly involved in these negotiations. He wanted to fight Jaron Boots Ennis. There was a total dollar figure on the table from Turki Al-Sheikh to do that fight. Boots Ennis, for his whatever his reasons are, ultimately elected that he didn't want to do that match. Okay, I don't know what he's got coming up, but his team alludes to something much, I don't know about much bigger, but some other significant fight that they're looking at for Ennis. Anyway, Teofimo apparently was blaming Turki Al-Sheikh for not being able to deliver Boots Ennis, which is ridiculous because Turki can only offer the money. You can't make a guy fight you. So to replace that fight, the Haney fight came into the possibility. But for whatever the reasons were, that was going to be a little bit less money. Or I don't know the exact money less, but it was not going to be millions and millions less, but it would be less. And understandably, it's, you know, it's not for the title as opposed to being for the, you know, the unified title. It's not like Haney looked that great in his last fight. Okay, so fine. So they were going to offer less money. At the end of the day, though, Teofimo Lopez and his team and Haney and his team, they agreed to the fight. They agreed to all the terms. The teams had exchanged contracts. Everything was done. They were getting ready to sign the deals to the extent that he even had already like been told that you need to tell VADA where you are because they were preparing to commence with the drug testing. So this fight was a done deal other than the signatures. But again, it's not a done deal till it's a signed deal. And at the last minute, he went sideways and said, I'm not doing the fight. So was it financial? Was it a personal problem? Get your story straight, bro. Anyway, so bottom line, though, they're not fighting on August 16th. They'll do something else. And meanwhile, Turkey is now making a different card for August the 16th. It'll be the heavyweight fight. Not official, I guess, but that's what they're doing. Moses Itauma against Dillian Whyte in a big kind of crossroads fights. Big step up for Moses and a chance to kind of get back in the picture for Dillian Whyte.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I wasn't going to talk about Moses Itauma and Dillian Whyte, but I'm glad you mentioned it then, Dan.
Well, just because it's the same date that they were looking at for Haney and the Teofimo fight.
But you've been in boxing a long, long time, and he's getting compared to the Mike Tyson because he's young and he's knocking everybody out, and he's got that sort of demeanor around him. Do you see shades of Mike Tyson and Moses Itauma, or have you ever seen anyone a heavyweight like Moses Itauma since Mike Tyson?
I think it's a terrible comparison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't compare anybody to Mike Tyson. He's a once in a generation, once in a lifetime, a comet-like figure to come through the way he did. It's way too much pressure, way too much hype. Let Moses Itauma become the first Moses Itauma. I do not think his style reminiscent of Tyson at all. Yeah, he's a good puncher, but there's lots of good punchers in the heavyweight division. Mike Tyson in those days was an absolutely devastating crushing puncher. There's a difference. Tyson was not a southpaw the way that Moses Itauma is. And I can appreciate the hype. I know all about hype. I've been covering boxing a long time. I've seen more crazy hype than you can possibly imagine. I do not compare Moses Itauma to Mike Tyson. That doesn't mean that Moses Itauma cannot become a heavyweight champion or a top champion or just a tremendous overall fighter and have a long and fruitful career. But I'm not ready to anoint him or compare him to the Iron Mike Tyson that I grew up watching.
Definitely. And again, talking about heavyweight boxing, obviously, Moses Itauma talks about Dillian Whyte. Now, there was talks about Anthony Joshua fighting American heavyweight and Jared Anderson and maybe even revisit that Deontay Wilder fight. Do you like those fights for Anthony Joshua?
Well, Deontay Wilder has a fight coming up later in June. That's obviously the first step to see what he's got left, if anything. And obviously, if he scores an impressive knockout and looks any semblance of what we once saw when he was one of the heavyweight champions. And obviously, Joshua was planning to fight again. He's off a little bit now because of the injury. And if Tyson Fury decides to stay in retirement, then I guess if you're coming back and you're Anthony Joshua, what's the next best fight for you for what the fans want, for your bank account, for how big it would be? If it's not Fury, it probably is Deontay Wilder, even though I'm a little cynical about it at this point because it should have happened 5 years ago. And, I'm kind of over it. But I get it. So I guess that's a possibility. In terms of him fighting Jared Anderson, I mean, they could do that fight, but I mean, that does nothing for me. I don't see what's the point of that. I mean, that's a complete, whatever fight for me. It's just taking, you might as well take a handful of names and throw them in a hat and start pulling out random fights. It doesn't make any sense. Jared Anderson got destroyed by Martin McCauley, who went on to get destroyed by Parker. And in the one fight that that Jared Anderson has had since then, he looked as bad as you could possibly imagine, other than he won the fight. I mean, it was just a terrible, terrible performance. So, I have no idea what Jared Anderson's appetite is to continue to be a professional heavyweight boxer. And I think Anthony Joshua and his team could do a lot better than that.
Yeah, and like I say, August 16th, card's not been announced yet, so looking forward to that real season again. Now, Dan, being that you are, I come to you to get that American perspective on the boxing world, and when
A
you
lot
have
of pressure.
a lot of pressure, man, because you are the number one guy. I'm going to give you that title. Keyshawn Davis.
Oh boy,
Yeah, yeah, you probably knew I was going to come to this at some
of
point.
course.
Keyshawn Davis missing weight and his sort of demeanor and attitude after it. Just talk to me about that.
I mean, you saw what happened. Here's a fighter that it's one thing to be in a situation where maybe you miss weight by a little bit and it causes problems. And if you're a pound over, pound and a half over, it's still unfortunate. But I can understand that. You see enough fights, you get it. These guys sometimes get to a point where they just don't have anything left to give. Uh, I can remember for years going to see and cover Eric Morales fights. Always looked like he was going to die at the weigh-in. He did everything to struggle to make the weight, and ultimately he would make the weight, and he would come out strong the next night, and he would, be in a great fight. I mean, I listened to my old pal Mark Kriegel and my former ESPN colleague talking about it on the Keyshawn Davis broadcast about being at Emmanuel Navarrete's recent fight and seeing him almost pass out while he was in the weight cut. I mean, it's a miserable situation, but that's what these fighters sign up for. That's part of the job. Or if you're uncomfortable with that, fight in a higher weight where you're not going to have that much suffering. The point here is that Keyshawn Davis, by his own people, Bob Arum, even said to me, when you miss weight by 4.3 pounds, you probably didn't really give it the true effort. Samson Lukowicz, who was the promoter for Edwin De Los Santos, who was supposed to be the challenger for Keyshawn Davis's WBO lightweight title, which was stripped from him for not making the weight. He was willing to make a deal if it, to see if they could work things out, financially, obviously, and then in terms of a weight check on the morning of the fight. But his perspective to me was we weren't going to do that because when I went to the weigh-in, like in the back, they were talking about it, but in the back of his mind, he could not shake the fact that when he was backstage, for a guy that came in 4.3 pounds overweight, you'd think, okay, well, he's suffering to make the weight. He's trying to really cut the weight. He's trying to make the honest professional effort to get there. And in the backstage area, he sees him singing and dancing and, smiling and kind of fooling around with, his team. And, he felt like he was not really giving the honest effort. And again, like Bob Arum, who was Keyshawn's own promoter, he's like, that much weight, you probably didn't give it your best effort. And I don't believe he gave it his best effort. The guys on the ESPN broadcast didn't believe it. And I don't think anybody that knows anything about boxing knows that a champion who comes in that much over and who then admitted and said, this is going to be my last fight at 140, at 135 anyway, before I probably go up to 140. I don't think he gave the best effort either. And he paid the price for it, by the way, because he took what was a burgeoning, excellent reputation. He had looked spectacular in recent fights. He seemed like he gained a certain element of maturity since his failed marijuana test that cost him a suspension and a victory that became a no contest. And he kind of was really mature. I felt that way. I had interviewed him a few times since then. And he took a lot of public goodwill, a growing fan base, both at home as well as among just boxing fans around. And he kind of flushed it down the toilet because not only did he not make the weight, he cost himself a seven-figure payday. That ain't my problem. He killed the show that his promoter spent a lot of time and energy on, and then ESPN, and it had no remorse. That's the thing. Okay, if you really were struggling, but there was zero shred of I'm really sorry, what I just did to my opponent, to my promoter, to my team, to my trainers, to my manager, to my fans, to the media that's written and covered me, whoever it is that supported him. You made them look like idiots because you came in and you didn't respect the sport at all. Again, we're not talking about a guy that's a little bit over. We're talking about a guy that is over by almost an entire other weight class. And De Los Santos obviously missed out on the payday, but his team did right by him. They weren't going to put him in that precarious position to be potentially not only lose a fight, but put his health at risk with a superb fighter who was not even close to the weight, who clearly didn't try to make the weight. Meanwhile, De Los Santos, he depleted himself, right? He made the weight slightly under. I'll say this also, Andrew, there have been a bunch of people saying on social media, well, not a big deal because he's going to get his full purse, De Los Santos. That is not true. Top Rank says that's not true. Samson Lukowicz, his own promoter, says that's not true. What he will get is some type of compensation. No, Top Rank is not obligated to pay him the full amount. There are some places where you're required, if the opponent makes the weight, but the other guy doesn't and the fight is canceled, you have to pay some of the purse. But Top Rank and Samson will get on the phone and they'll work it out. And the kid will definitely make money and take home, 6 figures. But it's going to be a lot less 6 figures than it would have been had the fight actually happened. So he's taking a hit on this also. And, we'll see what happens with Keyshawn, who then, by the way, got involved with all kinds of other extracurricular activities that were uncalled for afterwards, where supposedly he and his younger brother, who had won on the undercard, the fighter that defeated their older brother, Nahir Albright, they went in the dressing room and attacked him, apparently, headbutted him. Remember, Keyshawn had fought Albright, in 2023 to a no contest that was changed because of the positive marijuana test. So he got a situation there. And then afterwards, Albright and Keyshawn mixed it up in the tunnel, in the area under, by the arena outside of the actual where the ring is. And they had to call the cops, and it became almost like a melee. I mean, so it was the biggest just implosion and just disaster for the Davis whole family. Terrible. One brother lost. One brother got stripped of the title and ruined an event. The other brother got a victory, but was a party to, trying to, physically assault the opponent that beat the brother. I mean, we talk about one thing after another that's just terrible and should never happen in a boxing match or a boxing event.
I'm glad that was going to be my next question, was the altercation. So I'm glad you answered that, Dan. I mean, it's just a weird set of events. So you're almost like, well, you're a prize fighter. It's there in the title. You want to get paid. You fight. You get paid for fighting. Don't just do it in a changing room or at the backstage area. But it just seems ridiculous.
It's so immature and so ridiculous. And by the way, illegal. I mean, you get to fight in the ring and it's legal. If you're going to go beat the guy up in the dressing room, I mean, what are you doing?
Exactly. Staying in the lightweight division, probably a more lighter note. Then one final one for me, Dan, before I let you go enjoy the rest of your day. The retirement of Lomachenko. Speak to me about the legend of this man. I mean, I can rattle off the 396 amateur fights, the one loss. He avenged that loss. The
397 with the one loss.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. And then what we talking? 3-weight world champion, quickest to do it as a super featherweight, quickest to do the 2-weight world champion, quickest to become a 3-weight world champion. And to be honest, he probably was never a lightweight. He should have really been a super featherweight at best. And he fought everybody and anybody. Just talk to me about the legend and the Hall of Fame career of Lomachenko and his retirement.
He's a great fighter. End of story. I mean, he did everything you could do. He, as you mentioned, all the accolades in terms of his professional career, in terms of winning titles as quickly, in terms of number of fights, 1 title, 2 title, 3 title. He's the only fighter ever to, him and Rigondeaux had a fight against each other. It's the only time in the history of boxing where you had two-time gold medal winners fighting each other. He won that fight by a stoppage. Yes, Rigondeaux was coming up in weight, fine. But this was a fighter that was committed to excellence. His whole career he made a lot of money, obviously, but he was never about the money like some fighters are. When he signed professionally with Top Rank, he didn't go in there like most fighters when they're signing professional contracts and negotiating with different promoters. They're looking to get, the biggest signing bonus they can get, understandably. He was never about that. Of course, he got a signing bonus, but his only thing was to Bob Arum, and Bob has told me this story, can you get me a world title fight in my pro debut? Bob was like, I can't do that, but I can probably get you one in your second fight. So he signed, and they put him in a real fight in his pro debut. He fought like a fringe-type contender for a WBO regional title. It was a 10-round fight. He won that fight. It was good enough to put him in the ratings, and he got a title shot in the next fight. He lost a really close decision to Orlando Salido, who was a 2-division world champion and as experienced as there could possibly be as a professional. And amateur boxing, as great as Loma was, is still different. He really didn't know how to handle things that night. But in his third fight, after he lost that split decision, by the way, and Salido was overweight, so he was at a further disadvantage, but the fight went on. And he continually hit him below the belt in that fight, wasn't warned. But in his third fight, he easily defeated Gary Russell Jr., who was undefeated with like 24 pro fights, also had been an Olympian. The things he did were remarkable. And I've heard a lot of people hate on Lomachenko. I don't get that. I covered most of his professional fights in person. I'm like, he had what, 18-1, or 18? What did he finish? 18-3, I think.
18-3, I think it was, yeah.
I think I was ringside for like 12 or 13 of his fights. He would do, and even if I wasn't, I watched the fights. He would do stuff in a fight that I never saw other fighters do before, either in person or just watching on television or watching, old fights that were, long before I was even born. He had the best footwork I've ever seen, period, ever. That's people I've covered in person. That's watching, a zillions of videos of other fighters. The footwork was unprecedented. And it's amazing how he got that way. Before he ever was given gloves to box, his father, Anatoly, who was the trainer, made him do dance lessons, like ballet type classes, for like 2 years before he would let him put the gloves on, because he wanted him to have the proper foundation. What's the proper foundation? It's your feet. Mm-hmm. His feet were extraordinary. You combine that with the southpaw stance, quality punching power, tremendous amounts of amateur experience, heart of a lion, all those things. I mean, just go back and watch what happened in the Linares fight when he became the lightweight champion. Here's a guy that had taken his first knockdown, who had a torn shoulder. He fought through it and he knocked out Linares and became the champion. That was an unbelievable night at Madison Square Garden. Mm-hmm. And I get hate for this, and I love the hate. People can say whatever they want. I am here to tell you, on their best night, talent-wise, he had as much talent as Floyd Mayweather and Roy Jones. And if he fought Floyd Mayweather, who was a 130-pounder also, and you're right, by the way, when you say that Loma was fighting above what he probably would have been best at, but he went to lightweight because that's where he could get, at least some better names and better fights, because that's all he ever talked about. I interviewed him 1,000 times. I covered him in scrums where he talked to the media 1,000,000 times. He would only talk about, I want to fight the best guys. I want to fight for the belts. He never cared about the money. I want the best fighters. And he fought who they could find for him, who was willing to step into the ring with him. He was calling out Tank Davis 5 years ago. Tank Mayweather, wouldn't let him do it. They wouldn't let him near him. And it was only at the end of Loma's career where finally, when Tank was no longer with Floyd, where he started calling him out. But he would go into the ring and do amazing things. And, an extraordinary fighter. And like I said, I feel like at 130 pounds or 135 pounds, if he fought him in his prime against Floyd in his prime, it's a serious fight. Again, I've said this before. I'm not saying he would win or he would lose, but I'm saying he might win some of those fights and Floyd might win some of those fights. But to anybody saying, oh, Floyd easy, you're absolutely wrong about that. I know what I'm looking at. And he was a spectacular, extraordinarily technically sound, superb boxer, as was Floyd. And they would compete at the highest level. I don't care what anybody says. I'll die on that hill.
I might be on that hill with you, Dan. How's that?
You're welcome to be with me.
Listen, Dan, as always, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much, man. That was a great thing about Lomachenko. I might clip that, actually, because that was fantastic. Again, your podcast, your newsletter and all that is in the subscription below this, so go and support Dan if you can. Dan, have you got anything else you'd like to add?
I'm good. I hope you have a great week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. I'm in the gym tomorrow, so I'm going to go to my bed and get up early doors and get back in that gym, Dan. So, as always, thank you so much, mate. And if any news pops up, I'll give you an email.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good day, my friend, and I'll see you soon. Thank
You too.